This evening's event is part of the 100-year celebration for the Graduate School of Education. Deaf education hasn't really had such a wonderful 100 years. If I give you a brief run through all the background, I think it'll be useful when you're watching the poems. So remember, I'm talking about education here rather than learning. So I will be talking about school information. In around the 1700s, deaf schools started to be established. They had deaf teachers, they used sign language, the deaf children came together, they used sign language, and they developed signs as they needed them. Schools then spread across Europe and into America, South America, really around the world. I'm not saying that they were perfect, but they were there. Deaf people had an education. They were able to use sign language. In 1880, there was a conference in Milan, in Italy, where people got together and agreed to ban sign language. They felt that it was best to lip read and focus on any residual hearing that a deaf person might have. And their education basically went out the window. Deaf people carried on learning, but basically it was now from each other. They weren't getting anything from the teachers because they couldn't understand them. In 1978, the Warnock Report was published, looking at disabled children. And deaf schools started to close. Deaf children were separated, isolated within a hearing school. And this is still going on. More and more mainstreaming of deaf children. So, thinking about deaf education then versus deaf education now, and then, what will it be in the future?
I'd like to ask Richard and Donna, because you talked about classrooms and gave examples of teaching practice in the classroom, particularly using oral methods, and this idea that deaf children might learn to parrot English words but not know the content, not know the meaning. Is that those experiences that you've had yourself?
Yeah, as I was saying, my signing came from Paget, Gorman and Cued Speech. That's a form of teaching through oralism. So I was able to parrot things that I was taught, but I didn't understand the content at all until I got into the deaf community and I was able to relate the words that I've been taught to the signs and the meanings. I meet a lot of deaf professionals, and a lot of them are ex-mainstreamers. And the first experience they've had of sort of deaf and hearing experience, they've been to an oral school and they've achieved a reasonable standard. Then when they get to a residential college, they arrive there with their cases and they are stunned. Their cases actually drop from their hands because of the shock, and they see that that's what their future is. But if you put the two together, what an amazing experience that would be. Then in my third year, I asked for an interpreter, and wow! I just haven't realised how much I've been missing in all my previous years.
I work at Elmfield School with deaf children. So this is not a secondary school, it's a primary school. And their English in year 6, compared to mine at that age, is much, much better. And the reason for that is because the teachers use sign language. It's so beneficial for the deaf children to have an explanation in sign language. And I point this out to the children, and I tell them that the world is their oyster, the future is theirs.
Like in the classroom, learning from a teacher, that's not the only way of learning. There are many more ways. There's learning just from social experiences. So I'd be interested in your view on that, your own social experiences in learning.
When I was younger, I went to school, I went home, I went to school, I went home, I went to school, I went home. There was no social time. There was me and my sister because of the sport of my siblings, nothing more.
I'm trying to think how to relate it to the social experience, but it really had a big impact on me. When I was at a deaf school, I came from a deaf family, deaf friends, we all signed all the time. And I really thought nothing of it. And then somebody said to me, why don't you come with me into town? So we went down to the town, bought a ticket to travel in, and I saw hearing people talking to each other. And I said, what are they doing? What's that? So my mum explained to me that they were hearing and they were talking. And I saw that there were lots of hearing people talking. I mean, this world was full of hearing people. I was 4 at this point, and I cried. And I thought, oh, that means I can't be in the army, I can't be a doctor. And my mum said, yes, that's right. I didn't want to improve the hearing world, I wanted to improve the deaf world. I wasn't interested in the hearing world and its influence on me. I wanted the influence to go the other way, and I became quite political.
I'm glad I threw away that piece of paper. University gave me a lot of confidence. I'm now much more confident socially. I'm much more socially aware. I'm much more able to meet people because I feel I have a strong deaf identity to work from. I can ask questions. I have strategies for managing interactions.
I wanted to talk a bit about the writing of poetry or the language that you use. Do you, with poetry, you have to push the boundaries of language, and do you have to find new signs? Do you speak a different language in yourself?
But I can't do that. I can't compose a sign in written English and then translate it. I compose my poetry in sign language. And then I have to find an interpreter to write it down or do some translation of it. But the poem itself exists in sign language. In terms of linguistic rules, yeah, I mean, I think, with English poetry, you have kind of fixed line lengths and, all of those kinds of things. And they get played with in creative poetic forms. And we do the same in sign language. I work very, very visually. I collect images. So I'm using sign language, but I'm also working very, very visually. When I see, sign language is very creative in itself, and when I see somebody turning a phrase that I think is really beautiful, I'll just steal that little bit and incorporate it into some of my poems, because I think part of being a BSL poet is passing on the culture. In the ordinary lexicon I might do running in a normal way, but in the poem I might really slow it down. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's the nature of language, isn't it? That it's a kind of flexible beast, Language is always developing, it's always changing. And the same is true of BSL. With my poetry, I think I'm really very lucky to work with the people here sitting on the stage. I'm not sure that I create new signs, I'm not sure I would say that, but I certainly play with signs. Poetry is a very playful form, I think. I think you can be much more visual, as Richard says. With the cat poem that I've just recited, I can really play with some of those elements, the shape of the ears, the length of the claws, and so on, And those are not things that you would normally exaggerate in everyday speech. So yeah, it's flexible, you can play with it, it's very fun.